All right. Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Robert Swartwood. I am here with the one and only Brett Battles. He is the New York Times best-selling and a Barry Award-winning author of over 40 novels, including the Jonathan Quinn series, its Excoms spinoff, Project Eden series, a time-bending rewinder series. So many series, Brett. He's also the co-author with Robert Gregory Browne of the Alexandra Poe series, and recently with the late Stuart Woods. And we are certainly going to talk about that. Yeah, Brett, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So we're definitely going to be talking about. I want to talk about Stuart Woods
Sure.
and how all that came together.
Sure.
And I know in the green room earlier, we were talking about how we actually did chat a couple years ago. I don't know how long ago it's been, but probably over a decade at this point. I had a very short-lived podcast of my own. And we were talking about your writing. So I remember we probably talked a lot about this before, but I don't really remember much of it. So we're going to start from the very beginning.
I don't remember any of it. So
yeah. It's
all good.
Over 40 novels. How many novels now has it been?
I haven't done a count in a while. I think I'm around 47-ish, somewhere in that area.
You know it's pretty bad when you can't even remember exactly how.
I was really good at counting them, and then I got all, because I do a new one and it would come out, but then I started working with the Stuart Woods stuff, and I was still writing other things, and his stuff don't come out you get more of a delay when you're going traditional like that. So I kind of lost count. That's kind of sad.
So your first novel, what was your first novel called again?
First novel I published was called The Cleaner.
The Cleaner. Now I didn't mention this when we were talking earlier because I wanted to be a surprise, but this one, hardcover.
Ooh, nice.
I found this recently, and it's in good condition still. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
I have a few left. I don't have that many left.
The hardcover came from Delacorte Press. Now, was this your this is your first published novel? Now,
yes.
Is it your first novel that you wrote though?
No. I wrote 2 other novels before that, and I wrote The Cleaner was the 4th novel I wrote, and was the 3rd novel, and I wrote a 4th novel before The Cleaner sold. Well, almost. In fact, I was working on edits on that 4th novel when I got a call about wanting to publish The Cleaner.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick. So You mentioned to me before we started recording that you sold this to Random House without an agent. Now that's not something that happens every day. How did that? Do you remember how that came about? Where you sold
I absolutely remember because it's actually quite a story, and I told it before, but it's been a while. And to say that I sold it to Random House is a little bit generous, but let me go through the what happened. So I wrote The Cleaner, and I started sending out queries to agents, a couple of small publishers, whoever, just trying to get somebody on board. I had a few nibbles, but never got any bites. And that's, and my modus operandi back then was, as soon as I finished one book and started sending it out, I would start writing another book, because I just wanted to keep, I didn't want to wait and then start a book once I sent it out, because you never know, because I already had the experience of 2 novels I wrote that didn't go anywhere, that nobody picked up, thankfully, in retrospect. So I knew that I just needed to keep, if I was going to be a writer, I had to keep writing. So I met a friend who used to be in one of my in my writing group at one time, that I was in at the time, still in at that time. And he had published a couple of books with a small publisher in Los Angeles called Ugly Town. Ugly Town was kind of a boutique little place that a few good authors got their start from there. This now I'm completely blanking, but he said to me, he goes, I want you to send the book to the publishers at Uglytown. I'll tell them it's coming and they'll read it. And I'm going, are you really? That's very generous. And so I did that, which was in like February of the particular year, 2003 or 4, something like that. And I kept working on this other book, and I never heard from them. And I thought, okay, well, they got it, but they just didn't read it, right? And then I think it was January the following year, as I'm sitting at Starbucks doing rewrites on my 4th novel, trying to get it ready to send out, I get a call from Jim Pascoe at Uglytown, and he starts talking about my book and what they'd like to do with it and everything. And I had to say, wait. Are you telling me that you want to buy my book and publish it? Or, give me a contract? And they go, oh yeah, that's what I'm telling you. And I don't actually remember any more of that conversation. So it was great. This was early 2005, I believe. And so I'm excited. They want to bring it out in October. Yeah, they're a small press. It's not going to get a lot of attention, but it'll be out there, and they're actually pretty prestigious. So people respect what the stuff they put out. So hopefully you never know what will happen from that. Unfortunately, they had some problems with a distributor who went bankrupt, owing them money. And as a small publisher, every cent counts. So come August that year, they had to go out of business. And that was like 2 or 3 months before my book was going to come out. And I'm going, oh, okay. But then they did this really great thing. They previously, they had a lot of books that they would then sell, they put out in trade paperback, and then they would then sell to Bantam Dell, to an editor at Bantam Dell, to put out like a mass market paperback for. And so they sent my book to this editor at Bantam Dell, which is Random House. And long story short, Random House bought my book from them and then gave me a 3-book contract. And then so all of a sudden I'm at Random House with no agent. And then I met Mike, who is still my current agent still. I met her at VoucherCon the following that year, and we got talking. We actually met in the bus at the end of the conference on the way back to the airport, and we got talking. And I said, I don't even have representation. I'm not even sure. And then she handed me her card. She said, if you need any help, let me know. A month or 2 later, I ended up calling her, and she's been my agent ever since. So that's the story of how the cleaner got to Bantam Dell.
That is fantastic. And I mean, it looked like, and did this win any awards? It was nominated.
It was nominated for the Barry and a Seamus. Didn't win either, but.
Well, it has a really great Jeffrey Deaver blurb on the front.
Yes,
so,
yeah, I had some great quotes.
Really
I had
and the Jess Garrison too. Yeah,
I had some really great quotes on that, and I was very thankful for that. That's all because of Bantam Dell. They got.
And so, by the time this was published or this was accepted, you said you were already working on your 4th novel. Now,
I was working on my 4th novel, but I put it aside because it was I like all sorts of different genres. My first novel was kind of an urban fantasy novel. My second novel was a modern day sci-fi novel. Then my spy novel is The Cleaner. And then this next novel was kind of more of a lit novel. And, as most authors know, when you go traditionally published, once you publish a book, that's the kind of author you are. That's the kind of books they want from you. They're not looking for, at least in the past, they're not looking for things out of your lane, so to speak. So once I sold that, I started working on a sequel, which ended up being The Deceived, which is the one that did win the Barry Award.
Okay, so it wasn't until you at least had sold this that you then were planning. I mean, at the time, were you planning on more Jonathan Quinn novels?
When I
Or at
first
the
wrote
time, was
it,
it more of a just like a standalone and we'll see what happens? Or I mean, you've
I,
now what 15, there's 15 books in the series so far, right?
yeah, and the 16th coming out this fall. So it's as I was writing it, I wasn't necessarily thinking series. I believe it was somebody in my writers group who, like, when I was getting close to the end, who brought up the pike, hey, this could be a whole series. And it just didn't even dawn on me. This was just the story I wanted to tell. And like, oh yeah. So I started jotting down ideas for sequels, but I didn't really jump into it because I didn't want to write a sequel to a book that didn't sell. So, but when it did, then I jumped back into it.
Yeah. No, I totally hear that. I long time ago, I think with my first agent, I had a book, it was Man of Wax at the time. It was supposed to be a standalone, but then I realized, oh, you know what? This could be a second book. And so I started working on a second book even before we had sold it, and we never sold it. So what happened was then when, the whole independent publishing boom happened, I had basically the first two books in this series ready to go. So it kind of worked out. But I want to talk about the same thing with you, because I mean, you were killing it. I mean, you have been killing it in terms of indie publishing, but you were with Random House or Delacorte for quite a while. Can you talk about that transition? I mean, I guess you got you got to a place where just the publisher was basically like,
well,
thanks but no thanks, or what did they offer?
It's a little bit more involved. So I had the 3-book deal, and which was great. I actually earned out my advance before the cleaner even came out. And that's because Bantam Dell controlled foreign rights and audio rights and everything, but I still made money from that. And so they sold the foreign rights and I got money from that, and they sold the audio rights and so I had already made back my not so huge advance before the cleaner came out. But so that meant I was making royalties right away, which was great. That's a nice thing. After in the summer of 2008 is when The Deceived came out, the second book in the series. And and the way traditionally publishing works, as a lot of people know, you usually have the next book is already finished being written by the time when a book comes out, the next book's actually already done or getting close to being done. My book was already done, and I had sent it in. And then so I was out of contract. I fulfilled my 3 books on the contract, and then my editor and my agent worked out a new contract for 2 more books for a much larger advance that gave me the opportunity to go write full time. I mean, it wasn't like I was going to be living in luxury, but I thought I could squeeze out 3 years of full time work if things played out, because advances are paid over a certain amount of time. It's not all at once, as people know. And but that had been my dream since elementary school. So I thought I'm going to go for it. And if I have to, I'll get a job again. Hopefully not, but I can't miss this opportunity. So in August of 2008, I signed the contract. I quit my job in mid-September of that same year. 1 week after I quit my job, Lehman Brothers goes under, and the whole banking crisis of 2008 starts, which also spills over into the book industry. And Random House was kind of in a little bit of turbulent times then. My editor, who was like my best champion, she left to a job at Penguin, which ironically now Penguin and Random House are together again. And the publisher of Bantam Dell, because the head of each imprint is called the publisher. The publisher of Bantam Dell was also a big fan of mine, a big proponent, and always standing up for me. But Random House decided that they wanted to merge Bantam Dell and Ballantine together, 2 imprints. And so there would only be one publisher for the 2 imprints. And unfortunately, the publisher who was my big supporter was ousted. So I'm now suddenly without any of my advocates at the publisher, just signed a big contract, given a junior editor who we did not exactly see eye to eye my time there. But so I just set to, I didn't worry about it because at first I think everything's going to be fine. So I write the next 2 books that are in my contract. And then once that is done, basically there wasn't interest in them in giving me yet another, because unlike the first 3 books in my contract, they decided to put my second 2 books, which are on the bigger advance, straight to paperback with very little marketing behind it. So I earned out the advance for my first books, albeit, yes, smaller than the second advance. I earned it out before my first book ever came out. The second 2 books, I still haven't earned out the advance on those 2 books yet.
Still.
It's getting close. We're getting close.
Yeah.
But you get paid pennies on the dollar and everything. And it was, it wasn't a huge, it was like, I don't know, it's like 200,000 or something, which is nice. It sounds nice, but you spread that over 3 years. Back then, that was great.
Yeah. We can kind of break it down for aspiring writers out there. Cause I was even telling a friend of mine, Brian Keene, cause he was doing these workshops, like a lot of times you go to these writer workshops, but they never really talk about the business of the writing, like what to expect. Like if you really want to be a novelist, once you sell a book, even if you get a sizable advance, okay, well, if you have an agent, 15% is going to go to the agent. And then there's taxes. And then there's all this stuff. And then the advances are, that you don't get all that money all at once. You get usually half on signing, depending on how big it is, because sometimes they'll even break it down to like a third or 4, you know what I mean? So like, and so it's like, even if, and most people, they're only going to get a, maybe, 10, 20, $30,000 advance, which again is nice. It's sizable, but after agent fee, after taxes and everything, and that's why I always say, write off as much as you can, get a good accountant, know what you're doing.
And then beyond that, like if you do start earning royalties, you only get paid twice from the big publishers, at least it's still that way, at least for Random House, is you get paid twice a year. And what you do, I get paid in like May and November. My May payment is for July through December of the previous year. So it's July through December, and then wait 4 or 5 more months. Well, it's the end of April, beginning of May. So wait 4 months, and you get the royalties for that. And then the same for November is for the first half of the year. So it's it's lower. Whereas when you go in indie, or once you're doing indie, if you're making any money, you're getting paid every month. It's delayed 2 months, but once you get past those for 2 months, money is coming in every month. So hopefully,
actually, it's delayed 2 months depending on the platform you use, because some places like Apple and I think Nook Press now actually pay just the next month, so that's nice. But yeah, you get that money pretty much instantaneous.
Yeah.
Now going back to the final 2 book deal you did with the Random House.
Yes.
And again, going into the weeds for people who are interested, they really screwed you over by just doing paperback originals, because the royalty rate on those compared to a hardcover royalty rate.
Yes, that's why it's taken me so long to earn out. But I can't say they screwed me over. It was a business decision on their part.
Fair enough.
But the people who were then in charge of my label weren't the people who brought me in. So I was excess baggage at that point.
And unfortunately that happens a lot to a lot of writers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something
There's a lot of
really. And you need to, I guess, people who wanted to do this for a living need to anticipate that, where you might have an editor who is your biggest champion, and they buy your book, and like the next month, you know what? They go to another, they get laid off, they go to another publisher, you get stuck with somebody who maybe isn't as enthusiastic, or maybe not even as enthusiastic at all about your books. And then, but okay, so you said that those books have almost turned out, I imagine because of ebooks. And that's going to bring us into indie. I mean, if ebooks were not a thing, those mass market paperbacks that had come out, you know, would have had a shelf life of whatever else, and then you would have been much more in the red than what you are now. So
plus the fact that I've kept the series alive and continue to put out books.
That's another thing too we want to talk about. So at what point did you decide, screw it, I'm just going to start doing this on my own?
Okay, so what happened was they, picking up right where they said, I'm sorry, we're just not going to pick, we're going a different direction. Good luck, have a great life kind of moment, which was completely in their right to do. And I totally get it. That was 2010. And the self-publishing indie stuff was just starting to take off. Blake Crouch was starting to have some success there. Jay Conrath, Barry Eisler, some people, these are people I knew and I could talk to, and I saw what they were doing. And I'm thinking, gosh, I really want to try that, because I also wanted to break out from just writing spy thrillers too, because I love sci-fi. There are other things that I'd like to try. But talking with my agent, we came up with a two-pronged attack. I would write 2 books. Back then I was a very fast writer. Now I'm just okay.
Back then, I think you're still a pretty fast writer.
I'm not nearly as fast as I used to be. I used to be able to write 4 books a year. No chance in hell I could do that now. No chance.
Just as a quick aside, I remember one day I was driving home. I get a call from Blake Crouch. He tells me about the whole Kindle Worlds things for Pines or whatever.
Oh, right.
And he wanted me to write a story, whatever else.
Yeah.
And initially it was gonna be like a short story, a little novelette or whatever. And at one point, I don't even know how this came up, but I was like, I saw that you had basically written a book. It was like 40,000 words or something. I was like,
I don't even know.
And then Blake's just like, he just knocks him out.
I just had this really interesting idea for his world that I wanted to do, but that was good. So I wrote, so I was going to write 2 books. One book I wanted to try putting it up and self-publishing. The other book she would shop out to publishers. The book I was going to put up was Sick, which is the first book of my Project Eden series, which is the sci-fi into the world plagueish kind of book series. And the second book was Little Girl Gone, which is a bit more of a traditional thriller to a certain extent. Not a spy thriller, but a guy who helps some other people out in a big problem. Long story short, my agent agreed that maybe we should just put them both up and see what happens, because the Little Girl Gone was, it was I love that book, but it's very traditional thriller type, and that was the book she was going to take out, but she felt like, well, it's, you need some kind of hook to get people in, and there wasn't enough of a hook to make it separate. So Sick would have been the right book to send out to publishers, but that wasn't my brand. And that was the one that I also wanted to get out there, because this was pre-2012 and the whole end of the calendar apocalypse-y thing. And I thought, well, apocalyptic books were going to kind of be even, I mean, they were already getting big, but it was only going to grow, and I wanted to get it out sooner than later. And she agreed, and so I ended up putting both of them out there, and they did really well. And I put a whole bunch of other stuff. I did a novel novella, a short novel origin story for my Quinn series that I put out. I did a whole bunch of short stories I put out that year. I had one of the novels I had written and never published back before I sold the cleaner. I fixed it up, and I put that out that year because I had material I was able to put out.
Which one was that?
That was Pull of Gravity. That's the more kind of a lit one. Not very many people have read that one.
I remember
but I really like it. It's kind of a tragedy love story, not love story, but well, yeah, sort of. But it's so I put all that stuff and what I took to heart back then. Joe Conrath said something to me that really stuck in my head, because you want, it's just, think of it as the bookstore. The more books you have on the shelf at a bookstore, the more chance somebody's going to pick up one of your books. So you want your virtual bookshelf to be as big as you can get it, as quick as you can get it, as long as it's quality stuff. So I wanted to grow my virtual bookshelf as big as I could, as quickly as I could, because I also did not want to go back and take a desk job. I had a huge fear of that, and that drove me to write, more and more and more. I think before the end of that first year, I had already put out the second book in the Project Eden series, and shortly after that, the second book in my in the Little Girl Gone series, and then just kept going, boom, 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 and then I didn't really want to put out a Quinn book. I did the origin story thingy, but I didn't want to put out a Quinn book because there was still one Quinn book still coming out from Random House at some point that hadn't come out yet. So I wanted to wait until that cleared before I did it. Well, partly because the story would take off after that anyway, but I didn't want to cause any waves or anything, and I never did. But so I just did that, and it kind of took off. That was back in the days, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015.
The gold
those
rush
were great
days,
years.
as I call them. That's when you could just, I call them the gold rush days. That's when you could just upload a book and sell a couple thousand, and like without doing anything. There was no like Amazon AMS ads. There was no Facebook ads. It was just, honestly, you could kind of just use the keywords when you uploaded it to kind of get in there. And
there were two of those years, I think 2014 and 2015, where I don't know how. I made a very nice sum of money those 2 years, which was very nice. And it was mostly from my indie publishing, so. And then, so I kept going with that. I did my Rewinder series, which is a time travel, it's a trilogy. I put out the first book in that, and then 47 North, which is Amazon's traditionally published arm, they wanted to put it out too. So I pulled it back, and then they reissued it, and then they did the second book, but then they didn't want to do the third book for whatever reason. So I put the third book out myself, and they all looked, I used it's the same cover artist on all three. So they all look the same, but they still control the first two books in that series. It's fine.
How long has that been now? I'm surprised you
haven't. It's got to be coming up on 10 years, because 10 years, I think, is my term that I can probably get it back.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised.
I need to look.
I would imagine you could probably get those back. Well, okay. Well, speaking of the branding, again, this goes to the weeds for people who are interested. When you're doing a series, obviously, a branding is essential to have a branding with the series. Now, the issue that some writers were coming into, in fact, this isn't just writers who do self-publish. Like I've noticed, even for a while, like Robert Crace, like his Elvis Cole series, they were published with several different publishers. So depending on the publisher, there'd be these different covers. Now, recently, it seems like across, at least, with he's with Putnam now, with Putnam, and I think the stuff he had with Ballantine, all those covers are kind of branded, the same type of branding. For you, you had your first, what was it? Jonathan Quinn was the first four, and then you basically were self-publishing your own, so you had your own designer and everything else.
Well, even in the first four, they weren't
even branded
consistent on the first two, and then they changed it for the next two.
That's anyway. So okay, but we're at a place now that if you go to Amazon.com, every single Jonathan Quinn book has the same branding, and the branding looks great. I remember seeing it a long time ago. I don't know. I haven't really talked to you for a while, but like I remember seeing it and being like, man, that branding is great. I mean, the covers you had before were nice, but these I think were great.
Yeah,
so
they were great.
I'm curious about, especially because, having self-published for so long and also working with traditional publishers, I know that how a lot of times a traditional publisher will be very much set in their ways and they don't want to do anything. How did you manage to have now every single book, like the first 4 books were, quite
Mhm.
honestly, if you could have probably got your rights back at this point had you not done anything, but because you've been writing all these books, they're selling
Uh,
so much now that they are probably going to,
right. Well,
never go, quote unquote, out of print.
to be honest with you, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, ebook wise, they've consistently sold okay. Per my
Because of
agent,
you, I mean, because of you
she,
continuing that
yeah,
series.
yeah. So I've kind of, it's good and bad. And per my agent, there's no way I was going to get them back, no matter. Because I asked about it beforehand. She goes, "Well, we can ask, but don't expect." And I go, "Okay, fine." But it did always bother me that there was not a consistent brand on the series. And so I talked to my agent, and she says, well, why don't we talk to Random House? They could just say no. But they were very much open to redesigning the ebook covers. They're not doing the print, they're not printing it anymore anyway, but they weren't doing print stuff, but they were more than willing to do that. And they actually facilitated the designing of the concept. And the first 4 covers that were designed were their covers. And they hired the artist, but I had a big say in what was going to happen. They would send it to me and I'd give my feedback and they'd pass the feedback on and it would get done. It was a very unusual thing, I think, because I had a lot more control about the covers of my first 4 books than I had no control in the past other than saying, yeah, that looks great. So we came up, it was important to me to have some sort of framing device that we could carry it forward, and that what the idea here was this artist would do the first 4, and then I would license the design and have somebody else just ripple it out to everything, because I'd be wasting his time to ripple the whole series out at that point. And so I did that, and now they all are consistent all the way through. It took about, from the time the idea of doing that came to me to it getting done, it was probably almost 18 months to make that happen, but it happened. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, they look sharp.
Yeah.
And that's what you really need if you're writing a series, is to have some type of consistent brand, ideally a really good consistent brand across, the entire series. Because they just look really sharp and very, eye-catching.
I'm very pleased.
Have you noticed since you've done it, having sales increased at all? Like have you noticed a bump in?
I think they did a little bit. Honestly, I think a lot of my sales on my indie books over there, and this kind of can segue into the other topic we want to discuss, but they for the last year and a half, almost 2 years, I haven't put out a new Quinn book because I was doing the Stuart Wood stuff, and I had to finish the Excoms book that I had going at the time. And I've been writing another Quinn, but I had to fit it in between where I could. So I haven't put out a lot of indie book. I put out 1 indie book in the last 2 years. Well, the last 18 months. Yeah. Almost 2 years now, I guess, actually.
And that's the thing.
And so I think that is actually, had my sales come down because of that. But I the hope being that once Stuart Woods fans kept learning about me and other people, maybe I'll start getting up. And so right now we're starting to see just a little bit of a tick up. And so hopefully over time, as that happens, that'll go. Plus, like I said, I have the 16th Quinn book, The Taken, which should be out in November, I think is when I'm bringing it out. So hopefully that'll always spark stuff when Quinn comes out.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, if especially, when it comes to indie publishing, just kind of, I don't want to say churning them out, but just being on like a consistent schedule, especially if you're doing a series. Like I have a female assassin series where it's been so shoddy in terms of, years in between books. Like because I'm always working on different projects where I don't have that time to really focus like, okay, every year. And I really want to someday get to a place where, okay, 1 year, a new book every year consistently, because I think that, people, and going into the Stuart Woods, I mean, obviously now he did that with several of his novels, why he became so successful.
Yes.
Yeah. How did that come about? How did you end up? I mean, I'm assuming it was because of your success with the indie publishing that it caught the eye of, those are published by Putnam, correct?
Right. It's Putnam.
Yeah.
Also
so
Random
it caught
House.
them. So it caught their eye and they reached out.
Well, they contacted my agent. This would have been now, it'll be 2 years ago this fall. 2 years, is that right? Yeah. Okay, so they contacted my agent, and they wanted to, Stuart has his main Stone Barrington series, which everybody knows about, or most people know about, and that's the series that's 60 plus novels long. But off the Stuart, or off the Stone Barrington, there are a few different spin-off series. One of them, the one that's, I think, or at least the most successful now, is the Teddy Fay series. Teddy Fay is a former CIA operative who became a private assassin in a way. Everybody thinks he's dead. He's a master of disguise. Now there are people in the know, like Stone knows, and a few other people know. But he's now reinvented himself as a movie producer at the studio run where Stone's son is a movie director, and Stone's good friend Dino Bichetti. Dino's son is actually the head of the studio. So in Stuart Wood's world, everybody's interconnected. So this series was 5 books, and every book was written by a different co-author. And they wanted to try out a new co-author for the 6th book. So they contacted my agent because they knew that I wrote spy novels. They also knew that prior to becoming published, I used to work in Hollywood at E, was my last job. So it's not, I mean, I wasn't like super glad. I was doing graphics at a big network. So my job was not super glamorous. There are people in the industry doing much more glamorous things than me, but I had at least a little understanding of the industry. And so I guess they thought that was a fit. And so I wrote Obsession over the first half of last year. I wrote Obsession, which is coming out in October. And then I had actually just delivered, wrote it with Stuart, back and forth notes, all that kind of stuff. I had just delivered our basically final draft in last July, and I had gone and I went to Comic-Con because I was on a few panels. I was invited by Scott Brick, who narrates my Quinn series, to be on some panels with him. So I went. It was great. Get into Comic-Con for free. You can't pass that up. And then, like, I don't know, on one of the days of Comic-Con, we got a call from the editor at Putnam that Stuart had passed, and they hadn't actually released the information at that point. It would come out a few days later. And so I thought, I was sad for him, but I mean, he was 85. He had lived a good life. Still, I don't think anybody expected. It was kind of out of the blue, but he passed in his sleep. And I was like, I'm sad for them. I was also, well, I guess Obsession is going to be my only contribution to the Stuart Woods world. And I just kind of went on. And that's when I started writing Quinn 16, right after that. And then in October, I could tell you the exact date if I looked it up on the calendar. I was going on a COVID delayed river cruise in Europe with like 40 people, like a lot of friends and everything. It was going to be a lot of fun. A couple friends and I were flying out together from LAX. we get on the plane, and we have a stopover in New York, but because of a hurricane, when we land, we basically run from our plane right onto the plane that's going to take us to Zurich. And when we land in New York, I check my messages. I have a voicemail from my agent and a email from my agent. Call me as soon as you get a chance. I didn't have a chance. I'm going, okay, now I'm going to get on another flight for 4 or 5 hours, 5 or 6 hours, I think, and I can't call. So I go, okay. And it was also 7:30 in the evening in New York at that point. So it was like, I mean, I had her home number I could call, but I didn't have time. So off to Switzerland we go. We land. It's morning in Switzerland, which means it's middle of the night in New York. So I can't call. I have to wait until about 2 in the afternoon, I think, in Zurich. And I finally call her, and she says, well, I had an interesting call today. It turns out that Stuart was in the middle of his next Stone Barrington novel when he passed away, and they're wondering if you would like to finish it for him. And I was going, yes, I would like to do that. That would be awesome. I'm very honored that they would think of me of that. So I got very excited, but it was also very daunting because this is October. I wasn't going to be able to do anything. Really, they weren't going to give me anything or everything I needed. Well, they'd give me some of it, but I wouldn't be able to really do anything until like November 1st or October 20th, something like that. And they wanted it by December. And so I had like, I had to add stuff to it. I had to kind of massage some of the stuff that he had in there because it was a first draft. With everybody's first draft, there's certain things, I would never want anybody to read one of mine. So basically, I'm on the river cruise. I'm reading. They sent me what he had to that point. So I read all of that. I audio listened to selected Stone Barrington novels that they told me probably have the most bearing on this novel just to help you. And so I did all that. And I came out. I just got back home and I just focused on getting that done. And we did it. So. And it came out and everybody was happy. So I was very happy about that. And then in May, they gave me a contract to write another Stone book and another Teddy book. And I'm working on the Stone now. I'm about, I would say I'm about 25% done with the first draft. And then I'll do the Teddy. So those will both come out next year. It's not going to come out on the same speed that Stuart was putting his books out, but hopefully they'll continue, and I'm hopeful that perhaps I'll do even more beyond that. So we'll see.
So the estate's continuing his series, just kind of like Vince
Yes.
Flynn has continued,
right?
Those books.
My understanding,
Parker.
Right. My understanding is that he had told his widow before. I mean, at some point, not like right before, but at some point that if you find somebody, who can do it, and you want, please continue on the series, something like that.
So when you were doing the first book with him, because I've talked to some writers who have worked with Patterson already and kind of that process, like, was there, I'm assuming you're working off of an outline, or, I mean, how, or can you kind of just talk about that process? And then now that, he's passed away, sadly, and you now basically doing these books on your own, are you having to kind of come up with an outline first? Because for whatever reason, you strike me as a guy who does not outline. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming
you have nailed me so bad
and just knock it out.
I absolutely loathe outlines, and yes, I have to do outlines for these books, and so in fact, I just finally got it finished, finally got it approved. Because I don't like to think that way. I think books work more organically for me. But to be honest with you, with these books, because there are so many different characters, because of I have to try to write it in his voice. And, his books are very lean, and, my books are a lot more detailed. So it's good to have the outline. I see the benefit of it. I hate it while I'm doing it. But right now it's helping me a lot because I'm by the end of this week, I'll hit 20,000 words in 2 weeks. So I'm happy with that. That's great. Yeah. So I have to, first I do an outline, it gets approved, then I write the book. That's kind of how it happens now. So, and it's basically what happened with Teddy. I mean, we talked, we got ideas of how, it was more email, but ideas of how the story should go. And I throw out some stuff and everybody would chime in, and Stuart would get stuff. And then I kind of put the outline together, and then we went from there. So, because he was also working on his other books at the same time. So.
Right. And so, it's sometimes I feel it's even hard enough kind of dealing with your own various series, staying into those different characters' heads.
Yeah.
Here, you are playing in 2 of his worlds with those characters. So, did you find that difficult then having, it was one series and then having to then flip over and start the other series?
It was a little daunting because there wasn't a lot of time. Even when I did got into Obsession, it was like, okay, we want you, and you got to hit the ground running right now. So, thankfully, Obsession, the Teddy Faith series was shorted. There was only 5 books, so I was able to read the 5 books in the series. But Teddy also is in a lot of the Stone Barrington books, which I wasn't able to go back and reference when I first did Teddy. And I wasn't able to go back and listen to the whole series of Stone. There was 63, I think. Near Miss, the book that came out, is number 64. So I wasn't able to go back and listen to, because I do audio mostly, but I wasn't able to go back and listen to all the books before I wrote Near Miss. I had to, kind of just choose a few, because that was also on a very quick turnaround. I did, however, this year, when the contract was in the works, I started listening to all, and I got through the entire Stone Barrington series. I also listened to the Holly Barker series. There's still a couple of his books I haven't listened to yet, but I pretty much heard them all. And it gave me I'm feeling a lot more comfortable now writing the new book, because I have a better idea of where these characters came from, because he's got this huge cast of characters that come in and out of his stories, and they all have their backstories and how they're related to Stone. And I didn't necessarily know all of that when I did Near Miss, because there was no time to do that. But and also he had done a lot of the work, so I didn't really need to worry about that as much. But I wanted to make sure I knew that going into the new book, because it's all on my shoulders at this point. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. Congratulations. And again, you hit the New York Times bestseller list with Near Miss. And I'm sure
all because of my name on the cover.
Well, even it's the same thing for
I'll take it. I'm going to take
all
it.
the other co-authors. It's
I'm going to take
the work. So
it's a win.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said the next Jonathan Quinn is coming out when?
November. I don't have the exact date yet. I just got to look at the calendar. Probably pre-Thanksgiving. Maybe not the Thanksgiving week, maybe the week before. I don't like to put it out right during holiday week, but.
So obviously you've been busy with the Stuart Woods books, but even before, when you were kind of doing your own schedule, did you have like a whiteboard where you were like mapping out, okay, was there kind of almost a strategic schedule that you wanted to have every certain months there'd be a title, or was it basically like, okay, I finished this, it's going out, and maybe this one takes longer? And
back in the early 20-teens, it was much easier, because like I said, I back then I was a much faster writer than I am now, and I could actually almost guarantee that I could get 4 books written a year, and that lasted about maybe 4 years, maybe 5 years, and then it kind of went down to 3 after that. But I could also kind of map out, okay, I want to do this book here, so and this book here and this here. I always knew what my next book was going to be. So as I'm finishing up one book, I'm starting to think about the next book so that when I start writing it, I'm already going. And I can kind of say, okay, if I'm doing this here, I'll have it come out here. Now, I constantly was moving dates. Even though I had a target, I'd either move it up a little bit. Usually it got moved back a little bit, but never too much. But then as I slowed, I kept wanting to still have the same schedule, but I finally go, you can't write that fast anymore, dude. You gotta adjust your schedule a little bit. So,
yeah. So, and then obviously the audiobooks for the Jonathan Quinn ones are still being, those are coming out from Audible Studios, and Scott Brick continues to narrate those.
Yes, that is correct.
So is there going to be delay in the audiobook when the book comes out, or have you kind of got to a place where the book is going to go to them and then he's going to
I have always, my audiobooks have always been delayed by a couple months because an ebook can come out a week after you've finished all the editing. I mean, honestly. Right. Usually when they finish, the audio, a narrator can't even start recording it until you finish the editing, and he doesn't even get it actually until the people at Audible have had it, and the public and their producer goes through it or whatever, so there's a process. So
yeah, I just didn't know if you had you gave him a heads up where you were like, hey, you know what, this is going to be ready by a.
We've tried that, and we had with the best intentions, and something comes up with him or something comes up with me, and everything gets, so we've never been able to make that work. I've come to just accept it as a thing that is, I get the questions, hey, when's the audiobook coming? And I said, I'll let you know.
So we're coming up on 7:00 here on the East Coast. I don't want to take much more of your time, but obviously you're gonna be writing more Jonathan Quinn novels.
I am.
What about other series like your Little Girl Lost? Was a Little Girl Lost?
And then my Logan Harper. I actually only ended up writing the 2 books in that series. It was it's a good series, and I love the characters, but it was my least popular series, I think. Yeah. It sold, but it wasn't selling nearly as well as the other ones. I keep visions in the back of my head that I'll go back to it, but I haven't done that yet. My 2 most popular series right now are the Quinn series, of course, and then Nightman, which is a spinoff from Quinn. That's Nate, his apprentice, now has Nate and Jar, who is a character who's in later books of the Quinn series, and they have a kind of relationship, but not relationship, but kind of relationship. And so Nightman books are basically things they do in between missions on the Quinn books. So he's like, instead of doing paid spy missions, if he finds out about somebody who's died under suspicious circumstances or something like that, kind of he doesn't want to, but he gets pulled to being involved. And then he uses all his skills from his spy game to wreak havoc on whoever's the bad guy. And it's all told from Nate's point of view. And he's kind of a little bit of a wisecracker, funny guy. So it's fun to just get into his voice and do it. And I also, much like my Rewinder series, which is also first person, I do both of those in present tense, which is a tense that I've really come to enjoy writing in. I know, which is contrary to a lot of classical people who go, yeah, only certain things that works. I actually have now, I used to be very hesitant about it when I first started out. And I think I was just naive in looking back, because a lot of the books I enjoyed listening to are all in first person present tense or even third person present tense. And I really like it. It's enjoyable to me.
Yeah.
So.
Speaking of which, I just happen to have it on my desk because actually when I was talking to Dwayne Swerzinski a couple of weeks or a month ago, it had come up, Douglas E. Winter's book Run. I'd had it in hardcover. I lost it, and I ended up ordering a copy from A Books. So I ended up having the copy here. If you ever get a chance to read this, It's in first person present tense.
I love it.
And it
Love it
is
already.
it is, I mean, and his voice in this, it's just a great book. I mean, it has an Elmer Leonard quote that says, "Run doesn't
my
run,
God.
it flies."
Do
The
you know
style
if
is
it's in audio?
terrific. Probably. I mean,
I'll
this
check
came
it. I'll
out.
check it out.
God, this came
I'll
out.
check it out.
I know it's on ebook.
I 100%. I've almost stopped.
It came out
reading.
23 years ago, 2000.
Yeah, but there might be something.
But yeah, it
I've-
was funny. Jeremy Robinson, I remember he had gotten to a place where he found the same thing too. A lot of his more recent books were in first person present tense, just because he also found that he could just write those faster. That
It
they
does
just, for
go
some
faster.
reason, that it was really
Well,
interesting.
it's conversational too. It can be conversational in a
Yeah.
way in your writing, and it's more present. I mean, without, excuse the pun. I mean, you just feel like you're like right there in what's going on. So yeah, I think my next book after the Quinn, not talking about the Stuart Wood stuff, will be the fourth Nightman book. Is my plan for the next one after that. I also have a couple other books that I've been working on the side. One's a alternate universe kind of fun book that I'm hoping to finish, that I really love, and another is it's actually a romance of all things.
Now, the romance, are you going to be doing a pen name for that, or
No,
are you
I
going to
don't
be going
think so.
under Brett Battles?
I mean, if I do, it would just be like I might go BW Battles or something, still be me, but it's just a variation on my name.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of the stuff you've done before, there's still, I want to say, a lot of there's a thriller element to it,
Yes,
so it makes
I
sense
agree.
to keep it under your
I agree.
name.
I agree.
But if you are going a complete 180 in terms of genre,
I would probably
don't know
do.
if that's-
I would probably just like do the initial BW Battles, because then it's you can still know it's me, but it distinguishes itself.
What does the W stand for?
Winfield.
Winfield.
Family name.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah, I know. Never would have guessed that, huh? Nobody ever does.
All right. So one of the hardest working writers in the business we have is Mr. Brett Battles, Mr. Brett W. Battles, New York Times bestselling author of almost 50 books at this point, it feels like.
Hopefully soon.
So where can people find you online?
BrettBattles.com, great place to find me. I'm on I have author Brett Battles on Instagram and Facebook, I believe. I am on the former Twitter at Brett Battles.
Yeah, we don't talk about that site anymore.
I know it's really kind of depressing to me.
I know. It
really
used to be my
enjoy
favorite site, and it's just it's all.
I'm on Threads too, but I hardly ever post there yet. So
I didn't even bother signing up.
Yeah,
I figured.
I love that. I love the Twitter stuff. That was so much fun.
I know.
But there, you get me talking about K dramas and J dramas and C dramas and K-pop, because that's my side passion, all that stuff. So I don't know if you want to follow me there.
So everybody check out Brett's books. If you can, try to track down his first novel in hardcover. Was this just one printing?
Just I believe there was only one printing of it. Yeah.
What do I have? I have the first edition at least, so it's a collector's item.
Yeah.
There we go. So all right, well, everybody check out Brett's books. You can find him on the bestseller charts. So I'm sure with the next book coming out, he is going to be up there. And yeah, congratulations, Brett, on everything.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me here.
Absolutely. Thanks for hanging out. It was good talking again. And I'm going to see you. You're going to be at BoucherCon coming up.
See you at BoucherCon. Absolutely.
All right. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night.